Hey, Joy, what time is it?
It's time for the Cruise Day Fun Podcast.
That's right. And this time on the Cruise Day Fun Podcast, we have cruise ship selection tips.
Yes.
Very exciting. So
Very
we're
exciting.
gonna talk about how you can select the perfect cruise ship for you. Let's get into it. The first thing that a lot of people look at, let's face it, it's the reality. Most of us work for a living and don't have a lot of money to throw around. It's cost.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on looking for a cruise ship based on cost?
So there's a cruise ship that works for every price range.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and it also depends what you're getting. Obviously, if it's like a 3-night cruise, it might be cheaper than on a similar ship for a week or 2-week cruise. But yeah, cost, a lot of people are cost sensitive, so you might go, okay, what is in my price range? That's one way to start, but that's just one way.
Right.
Another way is to look for cruise ships based on the dates of the sailing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So why might you care about the dates of the sailing?
So if you're like me,
mm-hmm.
you need to ask for time off.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you ask for time off at Christmas time,
mm-hmm.
and go on a cruise, the probable chances that you may get that time off
mm-hmm.
is really hard.
Yeah. So your availability is one thing. And if you're going with a whole bunch of people, it can get really challenging. Booking far in advance is one way to help everybody, arrange to get that time off. But that's one reason to focus on the dates. Another reason is maybe you're thinking, I don't want to be on a super packed cruise ship, because we were on a cruise recently where I was told that the ship, all the rooms were booked, but the previous week they had, like, I think he said 1,500 more passengers on board.
Why?
And that was simply because school was out and the cabins had more people. They had kids in them. Families were traveling. So thinking about spring break, holidays, summer vacation, that sort of thing. Also, weather. If you don't want to go in a super hot time of year, or you want to avoid hurricane season, that's another reason to look at dates. So I hope you like that information. We're going to keep going. We got some other things to think about, some tips. If you like this sort of information, be sure to hit the thumbs up icon below and like this video. Another thing you might want to look at, something we look at a lot because we live in the Orlando area, is a lot of times we look for cruise ships and cruises based on the home port. We like sailing out of
Port Canaveral.
Yeah, it's an hour away from here. So your departure port might be another criteria. Mm-hmm. If you live in Florida, you're probably less likely to go, I think I'll sail out of New Orleans, or I think I'll sail out of Galveston or Seattle, unless that ship's going somewhere you want to go, of course, which is the next thing to consider, and that's your itinerary or your ports of call.
So, and you may need to look at different cruise lines just because they may be going to the port of call that you really want to go to.
That's right. So it's not so far, and we're going to get into specific cruise lines in a moment, but as far as looking at all cruise ships based on whatever your criteria so far, the ports leaving from, the cost, whatever, you might want to look at the itinerary. Maybe you've cruised before. Maybe you've cruised before a lot and you want to find an itinerary that goes to a new place. Or you've always dreamed of going to St. Thomas
or Hawaii.
Yes. So those are things to look at. And also when you're looking at the itinerary, this ties into cost too. I mentioned it before, the length of the sailing. And what you said about the dates, if you only can manage to get in a 3-day cruise, that's going to limit you on your choices, obviously. So the itinerary is going to be a shorter one. Maybe it's just a sailing over to the Bahamas from Miami or something. So the itinerary, that's another key thing to look at.
Right.
Another thing you might want to consider, and we're going to get more into this, is when choosing a cruise ship, think about the size of the ship.
Right.
If you've never sailed before, this might seem like, well, it's obvious. I want the biggest. I want the newest. They got all the coolest. They got more restaurants. They got more fun activities. That may be true, but a lot of times people that have sailed for a while, people that have been on a few cruises, realize they do prefer the smaller ships, even though they might be a little older. So think about that. that's going to make a big difference. Yeah.
Yep.
So we sailed, for example, we sailed on both Norwegian Jewel, which is a smaller ship. It's not the newest ship. And then we sailed on Norwegian Escape, which, wow, I think you could probably put the Norwegian Jewel on the Lido deck not quite, but it has a lot more on the Norwegian Escape. But you know what? I have really fond memories of Norwegian Jewel, and I'd go on a Jewel class ship in a heartbeat.
Yeah, me too. It was so much fun.
Yep. So the ship size, the age of the ship. Sometimes our next cruise we got coming up, we're going on a ship that's older than any ship we've gone on before, and it's smaller. And
right?
I'm kind of looking forward to the experience of seeing what it's like to go on an older ship with hardly any balconies, and see the charm of that kind of ship.
Right.
But next year we're going to be sailing on an Oasis class ship. So yeah, that has neighborhoods. So that's a little different.
I think we haven't been on that cruise line in a while.
Oh, Royal Caribbean?
Yes.
Yeah, and the small ship we mentioned, that's Margaritaville at Sea, which only has one ship, and it's a much older ship, much smaller ship. I'd almost be a lifeboat on the Oasis of the Seas class ships.
Right.
Yeah, we're starting to mention different cruise lines, so let's get into cruise lines. When you're picking a ship, you might be like, oh, I already know which cruise line I want, so I just need to narrow down by ship.
Right.
So let's go through alphabetical here and talk about things you might want to consider. This is not why you'd go on that cruise line. It's what you would consider between their different ships.
Right.
So I'm going to throw out some cruise lines, and I want you to kind of talk about what you might want to consider, why you might prefer one ship over another.
Okay.
Starting with the cruise line we've been on the most, Carnival. Carnival, how would you choose? What are the thoughts you'd put into choosing between, say, a newer ship like Mardi Gras and an older ship?
So we've been on Carnival a lot just because it fits our criteria. It's not as expensive as Norwegian or Royal Caribbean or Disney. So, and we've always had a fun time. We've never had any problems. And the service has been excellent every time. So sometimes, because Carnival is their main port is out of Port Canaveral. That's why we chose to live in Florida and go with Carnival on cruises.
But let's get back to talking about choosing a specific ship. What would you consider when you think about choosing between, like you mentioned, Port Canaveral? Currently, Carnival Liberty sails out of Port Canaveral, which we've been on, and Mardi Gras sails out of Port Canaveral, and we've been on that too. So why would you choose Liberty over Mardi Gras and vice versa?
It really depends on the itinerary and what they're offering. So if you like smaller class ship or a larger class ship, you can look at the different cruise lines and see how many people it holds, and what their length is of time, and
the number of days.
And the number of what ports they are stopping at. So
yeah, and you also might want to think about, like, Carnival Liberty. It's not nearly as new as Mardi Gras, and it's not nearly as big, but it's a ship we really enjoyed sailing on. For restaurants, of course, both ships have a Lido buffet type area with Carnival Deli and all these other great Lido buffet type things. The omelet bar in the morning, and the what's called Mongolian Walk. But then they've also got the main dining rooms. Mardi Gras has two main dining rooms, just like Liberty, but Mardi Gras kind of has more than that, because they've got Chibang, which is Chinese and Mexican. They don't call it a main dining room, but it's complimentary. And they've got, on the Excel class ships like Mardi Gras, La Cucina, or I'm sorry, Cucina del Capitano. I always get I always get Norwegian's La Cucina and Carnival's Cucina del Capitano, except Cucina del Capitano on the Excel class ships. You can go there for lunch or dinner at no extra charge, unlike the other ships where dinner costs extra.
It also really depends on what type of restaurants you enjoy, what type of extra things that you're looking for on board a ship, because you can customize your ship that you want to go on, such as if they have lots of slides, if they have lots of restaurants, or areas to shop at.
Yeah.
That's how you can also find the ship that would fit for your cruising.
Yeah, because even again, we're talking about Carnival specifically right now. Between the different Carnival ships, there's a big difference between the Carnival Waterworks on the bigger ships and some of them that have maybe one or two slides. It's a big difference. And some of the newer ships also have extra activities like the Bolt roller coaster.
Right, and then that's also, you can also do the comparison with other cruise lines. What ports are they going to? How many days?
Well, let's get into another cruise line here. Okay. But before we do, let's also mention, I think we made it sound like the bigger ship like Mardi Gras is the awesome choice. Two things to keep in mind. The bigger, newer ships generally will cost a little more, even if you break it down per day. And the bigger ships, they do a pretty good job of making them not too crowded. As a bus goes by our window here, once you're on board, especially after that first day, after the muster drill and everything, it's not too bad. But on a big ship, our experience has been that you're going to deal with a really crowded, long line embarkation and debarkation experience. A smaller ship like Carnival Liberty using the same facilities, it's going to probably be much smoother. So, yeah. Any other Carnival thoughts? We'll move on to Disney. Next one alphabetically we're going to cover. Disney Cruise Line. They have 5 ships, so they don't have the fleet that the Carnival does, but boy, do they have some awesome ships. The ships that we've been on Disney Dream a couple times, and we've been on Disney Wish. And of course, there's older ships, some of those, the Disney Wonder and Disney Magic. Comparing Disney Dream to Disney Wish, for example, their newest ship, to one of the kind of, in between medium age ships. What did you notice and how would you compare and how would you choose between those?
So Disney is very family focused and they're very themed focus for the different restaurants that they have. So, and one big noticeable difference is Disney does not have casinos at this time in any of their ships.
Yeah, they don't. I doubt if they ever will, but that might be a negative for you. That might be a positive for you, especially if you're going with kids. Yeah. Also, the newer ships, just like we're talking about Carnival, Disney Wish is going to have some newer things, like instead of the Aqueduct, they've got the Aqua Mouse, which has some more features. It's more like a Disney park attraction than a raft ride, which is basically what the Aqueduct is on Disney Dream and Disney Fantasy. Also, on the Disney Wish, it's a bigger ship. They have some extra added features. They've got, I think, 2 movie theaters.
Yeah, you can see the newest Disney movie that's coming out.
But Disney Dream also has a movie theater, and both of them have the stage theaters. I want to say one more thing about Disney Wish as far as newer features. One thing I really enjoyed was the barbershop. Not because I got my hair cut, not what I have left, and not because I got my beard trimmed or anything, but I went to Hook's Barbery for a top shelf whiskey tasting.
Ooh.
That was quite an experience. So they're doing some new exciting things, just like the cruise lines. They are constantly looking to add new things to the newer ships. And with Disney, you're going to get that added magical touch.
And plus, if you don't have kids like we do, there are a lot of fun activities that they set aside for just adults only. And they also have an adult only area.
Yeah, they do a really good job with the adult areas on both ships. So again, Disney Wish versus Disney Dream. Disney Wish, you're going to get the newest version of things. There's a slight variation on some of the, food stands and themes on board and that sort of thing in your rotational dining. Both ships have it, but Disney Wish has some newer. They've got that Frozen, Annandale, and Marvel, Worlds of Marvel, I think it was called. So compare those things, but also between an older Disney ship and a newer Disney ship, An older one, you're probably going to save a little bit. It's not going to be quite as much because everybody wants to go on the new ship.
Right.
Also, obviously, look at the itineraries and consider, the length of the cruise, because surprisingly, most cruise lines, when they put out a new ship, they instantly put them on week-long cruises, like Carnival with their Excel class ships. They go on week-long cruises. They put Disney Wish on 3 and 4 night cruises,
Right.
which really surprised me.
If you want to just try Disney, I would recommend doing a 3-night cruise because it's a lot more affordable than a week-long cruise.
Yeah. The shorter 3-night cruise is great. Just don't do the 3-hour cruise because I've heard those can go awry. Let's move on. Not Disney specifically. Oh, Gilligan. Norwegian Cruise Line. Let's move on to Norwegian. So comparing the ships, and I kind of stole this one. Comparing the Norwegian Jewel, for example, or a smaller ship like that to a bigger ship. And it doesn't always have to be small versus big.
Right.
Differences between ship design. What are your thoughts on that?
So differences is Norwegian, I would say, is definitely has a higher class of service that they provide.
Yeah, a little more premium than some other lines.
And there's generally an older crowd, but not always.
Yeah, but between the different ships, any thoughts on that?
The different ships? They do have smaller ships like the Jewel, and then they do have big ships like the Escape.
Or the Norwegian Joy.
Yeah.
And they've got these new ships, Norwegian Prima and Norwegian Viva, and they are really making some big changes in the layout on those ships. So they've got these different classes. Some of the classes are a little similar to each other, but they, like some of the other cruise lines, are really pushing the limits and putting race cars on top of these newer ships. The Prima and Viva have a food hall concept where you can go and get your food instead of having a buffet.
So much fun, yeah.
Yeah, so look at the differences. Know that you're probably the most popular ships, the newest ships usually are typically you're gonna pay per day a little bit more. So you got to decide, go back to that original criteria of cost. Is it worth it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other comparisons that we should think of between Norwegian ships? I'll throw out one more because Norwegian is really good with specialty dining. They have a lot of great themed restaurants, and they just keep adding like their newer restaurants. And we got a bunch of videos on Norwegian and Norwegian foods, but click the link down below or above and watch some videos on our Norwegian food, our love of Norwegian food. But their specialty restaurants on the smaller ships, you're probably not going to have quite as many, but they still do a great job on the smaller ships of having a lot, like having Cagney's or having Oceans or the
local,
the French restaurant, Le Bistro, and La Cucina. I got it right this time.
Right.
But on the newer ships, you'll find other things, like I mentioned, the food hall, but also like Q Barbecue. There's Q's Texas Smokehouse, I believe is the official name.
Right.
And Los Lobos, where you can get the tableside guacamole. A lot of new concepts. And that's the same thing with some other cruise lines we mentioned, like, for example, Carnival with having their new Guy's Pig and Anchor Smokehouse.
That's so good.
And so again, a lot of things to think about. Let's talk about one more cruise line. Another one we've been on is Royal Caribbean. Now, we've been talking big versus small ships, and boy, when it comes to Royal Caribbean, the first thing you're going to probably think of is big ships, because they constantly have the biggest cruise ships in the world. Every time they outdo themselves. So what are your thoughts about choosing between Royal Caribbean ships?
So Royal Caribbean ships, I would go with what are you looking for in a cruise ship? Do you like the neighborhood feel of the cruise ships that they have? And or do you like their ports of call? Royal Caribbean is a little bit more expensive than Carnival, but it really depends on what you like in a cruise ship.
Yeah.
that you choose from. So,
and you say it's a little more expensive, but it can be close depending on specials and stuff. We generally find that Carnival is a little cheaper, but this really isn't about comparing them.
No.
Go ahead and compare them. But right now, talking about differences between Royal Caribbean ships, if your idea of cruising is a quiet cruise and you're not worried about being able to surf on the back of the cruise ship or zip line, and you want to enjoy watching the ocean, enjoy being at sea, a smaller Royal Caribbean ship, and probably for most cruise lines, a smaller ship's going to be more up your alley. If your idea is more about activities and having lots of options for restaurants, and you like the idea of the indoor neighborhoods, maybe not being, people sometimes compare it to a floating mall because they've got so much, including stores and restaurants and bars. But maybe you might feel a little more attached to the inside venues, the entertainment and stores and restaurants and all that, than you are to the ocean. So if you're really about the ocean and having a quiet, relaxing cruise, smaller ship. If you're really about, I want to enjoy the newest restaurants, the newest activities, I want to do the flow rider, I want to zip line, I want to see the water show on the back of the ship, then one of the bigger ships might be right up your alley.
Right.
We like trying both.
Yeah.
We like trying both. So
we're not cruise ship or cruise line specific.
We're not. Well, no, we like. Like Forrest Gump said, life is like a box of chocolates. That we like the Whitman sampler. We like to try a little bit of different cruise lines. That's why we've tried these 4 cruise lines I just mentioned. We're going to go on Margaritaville at Sea in a couple of weeks, and
on a Princess.
We're going on Celebrity coming up in January. So we like trying different cruise lines, and we suggest you try different cruise lines. We have some final tips that are very important for you to hear. Before you do that, I'm going to ask, if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe by clicking down below. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a way to follow so you don't miss our next Cruise Day Fun podcast and other cruise videos, including cruise tip videos. Now, other criteria we should talk about for choosing between cruise lines. And I kind of just talked about it. It's not just Royal Caribbean, but between all of the different cruise lines, small versus big ships is one of the main things that people talk about when they talk about what they prefer. Right. Seasoned cruisers are like, oh, we're small ship cruisers. Or, oh, I'm going to be on the first sailing of the new ship. 2 things. What I said before about the smaller ships tend to be more relaxed. A lot of times they tend to have older, more adults on board. And the bigger ships with a huge water parks instead of just a water slide, and the new attractions, the new activities, the different race car tracks, and the skating rinks and all that stuff. Those are going to attract more families and kids. The other thing, I forget what I was going to say. Do you have anything else you want to share? Overall, final thoughts on choices before we get to our last tips?
I would say keep in mind where you want to go, what ports you may want to go, and what type of cruise ship you're specifically looking for. Yeah. Are you looking to save money? Are you looking to have your family along? Are you traveling alone or with other people? Because all of that comes into consideration of what cruise line would work best.
All of this information, you can do your research. You can go on the different cruise line websites, check them out, compare. If you enjoy doing that sort of thing, but if you feel lost doing it, get a travel advisor or a travel agent. They generally don't charge anything for booking a cruise because they get paid by the cruise line. Let them help you out. And if you've never cruised before, you're in for a real treat. But we recommend, even if you say, oh, I'm only interested in this one cruise line, I want to build up my loyalty points. Maybe that's a reason why you're going to choose a cruise line, cruise ships. Maybe you want to do the thing where you try to complete all the cruise ships, like with Disney.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
People would try to complete all the cruise ships. So that's another thing to do. But I recommend it's a good idea to try a little variety, even within the same cruise line. Try a smaller ship, try the quaint smaller ship, and then try the newest, biggest. Just if you are really into cruising, I recommend that.
Yeah.
So we hope you found this helpful. We have another Cruise Day Fun podcast coming up soon. If you have comments, please share them below. If you have ideas about future podcast topics you'd like to hear, we'd love to hear that too. And if you have questions, share those with us in the comments below. We also have a Facebook group. If you really are into cruises and you want to be part of our elite group of Cruise Day Fun Facebook group, we gotta come up with a name for the group.
I know.
Yeah, what do you call the group? Well, let's ask our Cruise Day. Let's ask the Facebook group. No. They got to join the Facebook group before. So click down below if you want to join the Facebook group. We'd love to have you over there. We share some things with them ahead of time before we put them out on the YouTube channel, and we share some things that we don't share otherwise. So be sure to do that and like and subscribe. How do we end this? I never can remember how we end this.
I don't know.
Well, why don't you end this?
Be safe, and thanks for watching. Fun, fun, fun for Cruise Day Fun. Fun, fun, fun for Cruise Day Fun podcast.